afternoon, good evening, everyone. Yes, Muhammad, welcome. We're finally here on live. Welcome, all you amazing people all over the world, different parts of the world. I know we usually have Austria, we have, we have Spain, we have UK, we have different parts of the United States, we have sometimes Canada, we have India, we have Somalia. I know we have so many places in the world that you guys come from to watch, and I'm honored, and I love you guys. So today we're going to talk a lot about different books, a few books. I'm not going to talk about a lot of books. I actually do have a book videos, a full book video coming up soon. I'm going to bring a lot of value to you guys in the coming weeks. I will discuss coming up. I will be doing a full discussion, a full video very soon. I think it's either next week. I think it's next week. I'll be doing a full video. Welcome, Mr. Unknown, right? And yes, Nikhil, welcome. Yeah, 26 seconds late. You're 26 seconds late. Oh my gosh, right? Nikhil, too bad, too bad. But anyway, you're here. You're here with us. So I realize there's a little bit of a glare on my glasses. So I'm actually gonna for this I'm gonna take them off. All right, so you guys can see my eyes. There's a little bit of a blurriness that I have to get used to, but then I'll get used to it. Okay, so I'm gonna be doing. I'm just letting you guys know I'm gonna be doing a full video. I just realized I cannot see without my glasses. I cannot see your comments without my glasses. Hold on, hold on. So you're gonna have to deal with the glare. Yeah, here we go. You have a couple questions. What are the best ways to improve critical thinking? Actually, yes, I do. So unknown. If you wanna jump on my my email list, I do send out emails every week about like tips for improving critical thinking skills. But if you have a specific question to improve critical thinking skills, I can help you with that like right now. But in general, right? If it's a general question of how to improve critical thinking, and I'll get into the books momentarily, but if it's a general question about how to improve critical thinking, one way to improve critical thinking, or just in general, how to improve critical thinking, is to um, consume content that actively challenges what you believe, right? What we believe actively challenges our own worldview. That is very psychologically difficult. It is Aristotle famously said that wisdom, seeking wisdom, is not pleasant, right? But it is, and it's not a pleasant process. It doesn't produce pleasure. Sorry, this is my dog trying to trying to disrupt the live stream. It's not a pleasant process, but it is a good in and of itself. By the way, my dog always jumps on here and tries to disrupt the live stream. You guys know who get on my live stream all the time. She tries to disrupt me. But anyway, let's get into the books. I just as I was saying, but good question. Feel free to always ask more questions. So coming up, I think next week I will be talking about one of the books I was talking about on the last live stream. I'll be doing a full video on that about Habermas's book that I was discussing on last week's live stream. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, feel free to check out last week's live stream. But then following that, the following week, I will be doing a full video on 15 books that have really helped me improve my critical thinking skills. Actually, these are 15 of, not the only books, but 15 of some of the central books that I have read, analyzed, that have helped me actually become academically published and all of that stuff. And and publish in, have my work in libraries around the world. So, yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm always looking for feedback on how I'm doing. I really am unknown, so I appreciate that a lot. I try to not be fake. I try to not be fake. I try to keep it real. One thing that I find about sometimes people, and I promise I get into the books, all right? I know that's why you guys are here. But sometimes one thing I find about that I actually got disillusioned about academia for a while, like the academic world. I'm from the academic world, right? And one thing I got disillusioned about was a little bit like the snobbery, elitism, or like this tone that some people have that it's like, oh, you know, I know this, and you know, you know, we should whatever the hoity-toity voice, right? So, um, you get what I'm saying. It's a little there's some sort of air of like elitism, like I'm better than you. Oh, you should listen to what I say. I try to say, hey, Genius 1000, hey, how's it going? I try to admit that I am not the fountain of all answers, right? I'm not. You guys have knowledge that I don't have just by the fact that I'm not you, and you've had experiences that I haven't had. So I do see us here on this channel to share knowledge with each other, knowledge that we each other does not know, or do not know, does not know, singular, each. Anyway, I'm a stickler for you know, tenses. Anyway, so let's get into in grammar. Let's get into the books. So the first one I will actually discuss is this one. So Derrida, Spectres of Marx. So it's Derrida, Spectres of Marx. It's a really good book if you read Derrida. Now I used to be. Now hear me out. If you know if you're against Derrida and stuff like that, or if you don't know who Derrida is, I used to think this was garbage. I will tell you. So hold on, let me read what you said here. It's always been today's psychological world has changed dramatically compared to our past generation, though. Yeah, and don't care about the truth. Well, I'm trying to bring that back. I'm actually, so unknown, I'm trying to bring that back as a trend. I actually believe that we can bring back the pursuit of truth and wisdom, self-mastery as a cultural trend. So, but I need all of your guys' help. I need you guys to help. So I can't do it alone. So Derrida. Yeah, Derrida. So if you've heard of Derrida, I used to think it was garbage. Actually, when I was reading it for the first time, because so in terms of my academic background, I come from this place of what's called analytic philosophy. So after World War II, there was what's called in philosophy what's called the linguistic turn. A lot of people call it the linguistic turn. And what is the linguistic turn? There were basically two pathways this linguistic turn took, right? They diverged in two different directions. The linguistic turn was a focus on language to understand reality. So why is that important? Because there are a lot of things that philosophers have said over the years, or there are things that people say in everyday life. And we got to stop sometimes and think, well, what does that mean? What are you actually saying? When you say that statement, does it actually reflect reality? What does it reflect in reality? Or even scientific statements, we have to be rigorous and ask, well, what exactly do we mean? So, if, for instance, if you use this case in point in statistics, even in like statistics, there's something called a confidence interval, right? Even in scientific language, confidence interval. Okay, so what do we mean that we have 95% confidence? What does that actually mean? All right, because actually, Bayesians, what are called Bayesians in Bayesian statistics, they have a little bit of a different viewpoint on that than classical probability or classical statistics. So even within the scientific realm, we have to be clear on what exactly are we talking about, what are we referring to when we use words, when we use language. Because, and here's the deal, many times we are having conversations, and this goes into social problems too. We're having conversations with each other, and I call it the illusion of disagreement. We have the illusion of disagreement often. Sometimes we legitimately disagree. Yes, true. And it's a matter of values disagreement or whatever. But many times we're actually just talking past each other and not actually understanding the words that are coming out of our mouths, out of each other's mouths. And actually it goes even further than that. It goes deeper. Do I understand the words coming out of my mouth? Do you understand what you're actually saying? Are you clear? Is your thinking clear? Actually, I have a video coming out about that topic this Friday. So a full length video. So feel free to watch that. But Derrida. Derrida is really, I used to think it was trash. I still disagree with a lot of his approach, by the way. It doesn't mean because I read it, I agree with his approach. I disagree with his approach, but there's a usefulness in what he set out to do. Hey, Keisuke, welcome, welcome. From Japan? Or is that just your username? That's cool. If you're coming in from Japan, that's very cool. Um, I know I have some Japanese people on my mailing list, my email list. So, um, yeah, so Derrida, yes. Now again, I disagree with his approach. I disagree with Derrida's approach. Hey, welcome, welcome. Um, yeah, actually, I haven't heard that name in a really long time, right? Well, yes, I do know. Feel free to reach out to me personally. I might help you find his work. But what book is this? So Derrida. So it's called Spectres of Marx. And once again, I disagree with his approach. But why is he important in the linguistic turn? His idea here, and I highly recommend you read it regardless. His idea here is that language, when we use language, uh, well, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it. When I say I disagree with someone, it doesn't mean I disagree wholesale. I don't maybe disagree. When I say I disagree with Nietzsche, it doesn't mean I disagree with everything Nietzsche says or every point. Right? I disagree with certain things that Derrida says. So Derrida, and I'll explain. Some points, um, some. Oh, okay, gotcha. So yeah, the ghost of Marx. Yeah, spectrality. Yeah. So, anyway, let me get into it. Let me get into it. You guys have so many comments, right? So, Derrida basically argued, and he would be against the idea that he's arguing anything in a way. By the way, he argues in a sense that words that we use are not. Yes, the weights of the word differ, right? Um, so he argues that words just reveal power relations. Words essentially reveal power relations. He would, in a sense, say there's really then no difference between philosophy and literature. And every work of literature, in a sense, is a work of philosophy in that you analyze the language and identify what are the power relations that are revealed within the words. What do we mean? So, for instance, when we say this is the dominant view, well, you're saying dominant, right? Meaning, someone else is submitting to you, and something else is submitting, right? He would analyze that way. There's almost a little bit of psychoanalysis involved within within this. So, well, yeah, feel free to disagree with me. Feel free to disagree with me. Yeah, Foucault. Yes, Foucault also. Yes, Derrida disagrees with Foucault in that sense. He does care less about power, but he does talk about how words reveal power relations. Foucault is talking about how um, uh, and there are different interpretations, by the way, because they're not focused on logical argumentation, right? So there are maybe different interpretations. And I'm not a scholar of Derrida. I'm just talking about what I understand from Derrida in my own research. But Foucault does talk about power relations, and Foucault is almost like eliminating the subject. At least this is Habermas's point of view of Foucault. He's eliminating the subject and kind of like Marx, talking about how there really only are power relations involved in social dynamics, right? So in that sense, yes. But Derrida does still talk about how there are power relations revealed within the usage of words. And he does talk about how, you know, philosophy, there really isn't truth in philosophy, right? There really isn't truth in, yes, absolutely, you're right. So Derrida, yes, deconstructs. So he deconstructs language, all right? He deconstructs language. And And basically, he sees everything as literature. That's the point. It's not so much focus on truth. It's not so much a focus on truth. It's more a focus on expression, and also in a way, I would say, you may disagree with me, but I would say Derrida is actually pretty heavy on what's called phenomenology, the understanding a philosophical text as expressing an experience, not so much expressing truth. So it's very heady stuff, but it's very important because I actually do. So here's where I really agree with him. I agree that you should deconstruct language, right? Definitely we should. I disagree, even as Habermas would, and Habermas was in the critical theory school related to postmodernism, but Habermas would disagree that there isn't such a thing as truth. So I disagree with Derrida on that there is no real truth. And again, I'll be talking in future videos about Habermas, how Habermas discusses that. I know there are a few comments here, but let me read some of your comments here. So Unknown, you said, how do I reach out to you? Yeah, I mean, I have the link in my bio. You can reach out to me by email. I have the link in the About section. You can reach out to me there. Discord, yeah. So Discord, I do have a Discord group. There are a lot of great people in there. We've got like, couple hundred people in the Discord group. You can, any description of any video, you can go in and you see the Discord link. So Alexander, yes, I actually, we would, if we had time, I would actually go into, because I want to keep this live stream brief, but maybe I'll do a whole video on this book, Alexander. I might actually do a video on this book. So I have a book on Habermas coming up, Habermas talking about Derrida coming up, but page by page, it would take too long to go into in this video. But actually, it's a great idea. Feel free to, I love your thoughts, by the way. Feel free to reach out to me as well. We can have more of a conversation on things like this. The other book I want to discuss, though, because I talk about books that made an impact on me. So the other topic I want to discuss that's related to language, the linguistic turn, Chomsky, Noam Chomsky. The book is, oh yeah, Alexander, I am like the biggest fan of Jürgen Habermas. I have a whole video coming up on Jürgen Habermas very soon. I am like the biggest fan. I love Jürgen Habermas. I think Jürgen Habermas is brilliant. I never said I don't like Derrida's ideas. I disagree, and I actually have some of the same disagreements with some of Derrida's ideas as Habermas does. That's all. I didn't say I wouldn't be discussing this book if I didn't like Derrida's ideas, right? So I like many of his ideas, but again, I disagree with him on some things. Habermas, I love Habermas. I disagree with him on certain things too. And that's what we find, we shouldn't, and this is a good thing, right? I mean, I think even Derrida would agree. Like if you agree with everything somebody says, right, and kind of just say, oh, I just totally agree with everything you say, I think it's likely not very deconstructive, right? You didn't deconstruct them enough, right? In a sense, we didn't analyze enough, because we kind of should have some of our own perspective, right? Maybe we disagree on this point, or maybe we have a different idea. So yeah, Habermas. So it's Habermas, Nikhil, and again, I have a full video. I have a full video coming up on Jürgen Habermas. Well, I think it's either next week or a week after. It's a full video on one of his books. So feel free to check that out. Let's talk about Noam Chomsky and on language. So Noam Chomsky invented the idea of what he called generative grammar. Actually, when I wrote my book, Rationality, Virtue, and Liberation, I reached out to Noam Chomsky directly. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so I reached out to Noam Chomsky directly. And I said, hey, I would be honored if you read my book, because I was so inspired by your theory of generative grammar. So I'll explain what generative grammar means. The theory of generative grammar is essentially a theory of innate structures of the mind that lead to language development and language understanding. It kind of harkens back to, if you guys know, probably if you're on this live stream, a lot of you know Immanuel Kant. So it harkens back to a lot of Immanuel Kant's ideas about innate structures. Now, no worries. I actually love to have a conversation with you guys. So if I don't get to your comment right away, it's fine. I'm gonna respond to your comment at some point on the live stream. So don't worry. Um, so so anyway, the theory of generative grammar. So now Chomsky, notably, Noam Chomsky and another thinker, Steven Pinker, have debated this. Have debated this. In a way, right? In a way, adopts a lot of Jungian ideas. Um, but so he debated another linguist, Steven Pinker. Yeah, Steven Pinker, right? And Steven Pinker kind of believes more in the tabula rasa, like blank slate theory in terms of language development. So they have notably debated each other throughout the years. I actually tend to agree more with Noam Chomsky, and I do believe not believe. I think there's actually really good evidence in the past decade in the cognitive sciences to show that Chomsky's more on the right track than Pinker. Although again, I agree with a lot of what Pinker says too. There are elements of what that I agree with Pinker, and there are, I think, a lot of elements with which I agree with Chomsky. But why was Chomsky so impactful and impactful for me? Because I wrote about value theory. I write about value theory. I do research on value theory, which is the study of human values and value-driven behavior. And I've published on this. So I was inspired by the theory of generative grammar in the sense that I told Chomsky about this. I said, you should read this, because my book. Please read it. I don't know if he ended up reading it, but he did respond to me. He did respond to me and said it looked interesting, so I was like, okay, that's a win. But anyway, so I said, hey, you should read this because it's very much in the line of generative grammar, my own theory. So what's the book about? So we were actually talking about Derrida, Spectres of Marx, and then also we're talking about Noam Chomsky's theory of generative grammar. So actually, let me read what you're saying here, Ezekiel. So Alexander, price is a value expressed in money. Could you clarify? I'd love to understand what you're talking about here. So Chomsky's idea of innate structures of the mind reminds me of Jungian archetypes and Platonic forms, in the sense that the universals give rise to the particulars. Yes, in a way it is reminiscent of that. It actually reminds me, Ezekiel, more of Kantian philosophy, and I think, of course, Immanuel Kant has inevitably touched every part of modern philosophy, including Chomsky. But it's kind of, to me, and I think you're right as well. But to me, it almost goes right back to Kantian philosophy. Kant talked about space and time, or now what we know as space-time, thanks to Einstein, as basically forms of intuition. They are built into the structures of our mind, not in an idealist sense like Berkeleyanism and things like that, but not in an idealistic sense, idealism sense, which is what people totally misinterpret Kant as being an idealist. He's not. He believes there is an objective world. He just talks about forms of perception. There are ways that we can and cannot perceive reality based on the structure of our mind. Cognitive science, modern cognitive science, really more and more and more. I go into these studies. I look at this research, on a weekly basis. Very, very interesting. I think it continues to confirm, I believe, a lot of what Kant talked about. So Alexander, price that you pay anywhere is value expressed in money. Sure, I would agree with that. But value, going deeper than that, value theory meaning not just economics, the historical value, aesthetic value, like artistic value, moral value. Like there are many forms of value, not just price. Price is one measure of value, right? Um, and Ezekiel said, I just started Critique of Pure Reason, very dense. Taking, yeah, actually, Ezekiel, what I would recommend if you're digging into the Critique of Pure Reason, it's really hard. It's really dense to read Kant. I think I think probably you can spend, uh, maybe several hours just reading a few pages and kind of trying to deconstruct it. We talked about deconstruction, right? Okay. But what I would recommend is there are some Cambridge guides to Kant where you actually still have the text, the original text, but then you have a commentary every few pages, and then that author will actually kind of decode what Kant is saying. So I would recommend, if it's really dense, you're finding it really dense, try to find a companion guide to the Critique of Pure Reason. So yeah, Keisuke, this is so cool. I actually don't read that much, but listening to these new ideas are fantastic. Currently, I'm reading Chanakya Niti. Okay, great. And just completed Influenced by Robert Cialdini. Very good book, Influenced by Robert Cialdini. Very good. Robert Cialdini, I think, is very good. Does very good work because he actually does a lot of evidence-based behavioral analysis instead of just, hey, here's what I did and it worked, right? There's too much of that out there. So Robert Cialdini is very good. How can you talk about how humans derive value? Very, not in 4 minutes, not in 5 minutes. It's a very, very complex answer, but how do humans derive value? Well, I would argue that it has a lot to do with human agency and the structure. There's a multi-tiered structure of human agency. If you look at Albert Bandura's work in If My Dog Doesn't Bother. Here's how I derive value from my doggy here, right? She's of great value to me, right? I love my dog. Anybody else here a dog fan, dog person? So, and you don't need to read Kant. You can read others writing about Kant. Yeah, true, right? If you want to read the original text, right? But Ezekiel, it's a very complex topic, right? Complex thought process. Scientology, no comment. No comment. Beyond. I don't know. I still don't know whether that's a religion or whether it's I don't know. No comment about that. Keisuke, roughly value can be derived from their current economic position, I guess. Yeah, so but value is not just economic value, right? And we cannot, I mean, theoretically speaking, you can't reduce all. There are theorists who believe that all value is just economic value. It's very implausible, and it's not just implausible philosophically, but it's implausible from the standpoint of behavioral science as well. We know from lots of research that's been done in behavioral science, humans are not purely economically motivated. It's a pretty well debunked hypothesis. So the idea within look into, for instance, there's a whole field that's very fast growing field called neuroeconomics. Within the field of neuroeconomics, studying how the brain interacts with economic decision making, or what the brain function with respect to economic decision making. When we do these studies of rational decision making, economic decision making in laboratory settings, very often, to a statistically significant degree, very often, people do not behave that way outside of a lab setting. All right, and that is what a lot of this field is revealing. And so it's just implausible that all value is economic value, right? Just from that standpoint. Yeah, exactly. I value my dog, right? Oh yeah, that's a good question. No, I would not put my dog down for money. Now, if you're talking about a moral dilemma for the sake of greater good, it would depend. It would depend on the situation, right? If it were to save my mother, right? I hate to think of that situation, but for example, I mean, if it were to save my mother, I, I hope nobody. There are people in the world that have to make horrible decisions like that and are forced into those situations. That in itself is a form of injustice, I would argue, that we should help to correct, but to be put in a limited moral dilemma type situation like that in the first place, to have those constrained choices in itself, I would say is an evil. Um, a summary of my philosophical stance, if I have time. All right, it's okay. It's hard to summarize. Let me put it this way. I believe, Ezekiel, that there is truth. I believe that there is truth, such a thing as truth. I believe that there is such a thing as actually moral truth as well. However, and there's a big however here, I am not moralistic, meaning that I take the position similar to Jürgen Habermas, who I was discussing before, that we need each other, and we need to consider the basically the viewpoints of all those involved and the interests of all those involved in whatever decision we make, in order to decide what is moral and what is valuable, right? So meaning, I have a pretty good idea of what I think is well, so Alexander, that's how I interpret Derrida. I do interpret Derrida as kind of opposing the idea of truth, or not putting much credence into the idea of truth in general. I do think maybe Derrida believes that there's some sort of phenomenological truth. This is a little bit different, though, phenomenological truth. It's not like logical or empirical truth. It's a truth of your experience, something like that. Is truth achievable by language? Very good question, Alexander. That I am still trying to figure out myself. Is truth achievable by language? Is truth achievable by language? Even in science, let me say, we think of science as like up there, in terms of truth. But even within science, here's even my position from a scientific perspective. Science, I see the science as not necessarily the goal of science. Maybe is to achieve truth, to some extent, some truth, right? To some extent, some observational truth. But science, I see the role of science even as providing predictive power, doing our best to predict what is going to happen, making models for prediction. Is that in itself, a form of truth? Yes. Does it mean that the models that we come up with reflect truth and objective reality? Maybe not, because as Derrida did point out, as many phenomenologists pointed out, Husserl, right, pointed out, Wittgenstein to some extent pointed out, there is a truth within our own experience that is not achievable through just mere observation, objective observation. This is getting very, very deep here. Truth achievable by language. So, no, Kaisuke, don't worry about it. I actually I don't like when people say it's a low IQ question. You're learning. Everybody's learning. We're learning. We're learning together. This is great. There's no stupid question. There really is no stupid question. There's a question that you're trying to understand, which is great. So don't put yourself down, right? It's great that you're actually asking a question. Most people are too cowardly to ask a question, right? That's what physics and computer science, data science is all about, predicting the future. Exactly. So that's how I see it. Even statistics, practices in statistics they're about prediction. And I respect that fully, right? About probability and prediction. Truth, It's a deeper question. When we say Keisuke, what does that mean? Truth achievable by language. The question is, when we say things and we say that they're true or false, right? When we make statements, is it even possible to discover the truth by analyzing our statements and what we mean in language? Is it possible? That's the question, right? Because there are many. There's a vagueness around this. Yeah, Ezekiel, yes. And we could go down a rabbit hole here forever, right? But this is all the time I have for the live stream today, guys. So feel free to subscribe. I want to keep having conversations with you. If you want to check out my Critical Thinking Academy, the information is in the about section in my bio or any description as well. But guys, I have loved spending time with you. Unsubscribed. I can't wait for the next one. I hope you said I am subscribed. Oh, yeah. Now you subbed. Okay, great. Awesome. So, like, answer for Schrodinger's cat. Yes, like Schrodinger's, maybe like Schrodinger's cat. That's more like quantum physics, but deeper conversation down the rabbit hole for that. So, guys, I really appreciate being with you. Watch out for my next videos. I appreciate hearing from you. Feel free to reach out to me whenever. I love talking to you. Either join my Discord or whatever you want to do. So guys, have a great day. I will see you soon.